Who am I? I'm the schmuck. I am the last one to know. I am the aggrieved. I am the wronged. People talk about forgiveness, how forgiving washes your soul of the bile of hate, how forgiveness allows one closure. With forgiveness, they say, you can rebuild. I, however, ain't in a forgiving mood. I've been discovering a lot of things about myself of late. I, for example, am not a mushroom. See, it turns out, I don't like being fed garbage or kept in the dark. Or that new age corporate crap, la la la, we must all go along to get along. Balderdash. Nope, I am not just going along. No more. Nada, zip, no, cha-cha. Nor am I going to get along. I am certain I can't get past this. In the past, I let stuff roll off me, like water off a duck's back. After this fun little ride, I will get my pound of flesh. Then I might forgive. I wouldn't advise you to go to Vegas and bet the rent money on it. As to moving on. That's easy to say, mind you. Not so easy extracting yourself from your whole life. How can you minimize your own suffering? From where I sit, that seems to be quite the trick. I'm 5'8". I carry more than a few extra pounds. I've never been thin. I was never an athlete. I'm equipped with broad shoulders and a barrel chest. I would have made a mean center linebacker with my build. But as I said, I never was, nor wanted to be, an athlete. I've always been a bit pudgy on the outside. Women have never drooled over me. At best, a gal might say I'm cute. I'm not cute, by the way. However, on the inside, there is nothing pudgy about me. I have deep wells of determination, endurance, and strength that carry me on long after most would abandon their efforts. It is my superpower. I don't give up, and I don't quit. Now a little about what motivates me. Justice. As far as I can see, I am owed for all that I lost. I had it. Poof. Now it's gone and he has it. I'd call that theft. Then there is the little fact that I really don't like to lose. Please allow me to rephrase that. If I give even the very smallest of a darn about something, then I hate to lose. I mean, I really hate to lose. Over the years, I have found that there are not a whole lot of lines I will not cross. Not to lose something I do give a darn about. Like I said, I really don't like to lose. So, I want some good old-fashioned justice. I'd like to go all Old Testament on the jerk's rear. I don't think that's too much to ask. As a reasoned, rational response to such a massive betrayal at my dear wife's hand, I have no problem seeing bridges burnt. Now, I do have some hard stops, like I really don't want to go to jail. But in this case, if need be, sure, I would do some time. Not a lot. Maybe a year or two. I didn't start this, but I sure as hell was going to end it. Which brings me back to the subject of jerk. Thinking about it, he actually wasn't worthy of my time or attention. Nonetheless, here I am, spending my time and my money because he definitely has my attention. At this point, he pretty much is my to-do list. As maybe one can tell, on this one, I do give a darn. He wasn't my friend, partner, or lover. He never lied to me. He didn't break any promises to me. But her? Which? Tick-tock, tick-tock, I said in a pretty loud voice at the locked door. Then I lit the gas-soaked rag I had stuffed under the door. Come out, wherever you are!" I yelled at the door. The smoke was billowing. I had to step back from the locked door. It was doing a great job of catching on fire. At least it was on my side of the door. I could hear screaming from the other side of the locked door. I heard glass shatter. Maybe they can tie the bedsheets together, like a jailbreak, and get to the ground. But 3 stories is a pretty long way down for one bed of sheets. Yeah, like she would ever do that. I chuckled to myself. I used the fire extinguisher to put the fire out on my side of the door. Who knows what is going on the other side of the door? I screamed out, "I'm coming for you, you cheating wench." I think they heard me because I could hear her wailing. I kicked the smoldering door open, and the flame inside the room tried to jump past me. I used the second extinguisher to knock it back, then the third, in the room, to knock it out. I looked around the room. The damage wasn't too bad. I'd say it was singed. The bed was a mess, stripped of its sheets. their clothes scattered about the room. Now isn't that sweet, they were having champagne. I grabbed the bottle and guzzled me some champagne. Woo, baby, we're living large. They had, in fact, tied the bed sheet to the leg of the bed. I could see it trailing out the broken window. I walked over to the window and carefully looked out. Damn. And she was terrified of heights. Hell, get her on a high bridge and she would wet herself. Yeah, it was a phobia kind of thing. Oh well. Yet, there they were. Two nudes out on a ledge. She was doing a starfish imitation trying to cling to the wall. The bed sheets fluttered in the wind, just out of their reach. She was screaming bloody murder. He didn't look too good either. They were standing on the 6-foot, well, maybe 5-foot, decorative ledge 2 stories up over the driveway. No access. That was about the time the news helicopter showed up. It pays to plan. I had called Channel 12. It's the Fox affiliate in town. They had an old-fashioned local TV news outlook. If it bleeds, it leads. I came close. Fire in a flammable historic mansion turned bed and breakfast that was always booked months in advance. Strangely, the TV in the room was turned on to Channel 12, so standing in the smoldering, smoke-filled room, I could watch my frantic wife trying to hide her nudity from the chopper's spotlight while staying on the 4.5-inch ledge, being whipped by the rotor wash of the helicopter. It made for pretty entertaining TV. Well, at least for me. The fire department is arriving, a time I will be getting along. While the fire department was focused on my wife and her lover, I grabbed her lover's pants. I pulled out his car's key fob and wallet, stuffed them in my pants, then slipped out the door and headed down the back stairs. It was kind of weird to be gently descending in the ancient stairwell, listening to only the noise of my feet hitting every other tread, as insanity raged just mere meters from where I was. I reached the bottom of the stairs and then headed out the kitchen door. Once outside, I called her parents. I found her. She's at the old Miller bed and breakfast. I think she is trying to jump. Turn on Channel 12. I hung up before her father could say anything. I watched as a hook and ladder truck arrive and was moving into position. I saw 3 more helicopters circling trying to get great TV. I took her lover's car key fob and started pushing its button. It was a high-dollar Mercedes that clicked and beeped. I climbed in and drove away. Man, this is a nice ride. I drove home and parked that sweet ride inside my garage. I started going through the glove box. Nothing too interesting. Now, in the trunk was his work computer, with his notebook containing his passwords. The idiot was clearly old school. I took the laptop into my office and started looking to see what I could find. I struck gold in his emails. It sure was looking like he was not on the up and up. But who am I to say? I'm not an accountant, but it sure looked like he was running 2 sets of books for his company. As I said, I couldn't really make heads or tails, so I forward all the files to the IRS and the board of directors of his company. Then there were the beautiful shots of my wife, and then selfies that he took while being intimate with her. I texted those files to my wife's PTA, our church's bishop, and her high and mighty friends at the country club. Then I sent them to her sister, mom, and dad, and her old grandmother. She was pushing 95, and her grandfather, who passed a couple of years ago, was an old-time hellfire and brimstone preacher. I wondered how she would take her granddaughter's adult films. I know some folks would ask why I would out myself as a humiliated husband. Well, I wasn't crazy. The TV outed my status, so... Wow. He has all his credit cards locked and loaded in his laptop. I always wanted to get a really nifty adult account or 30. Let's see. It had been a big day. I was tired. I think the adrenaline rush wore off an hour or 2 ago. I locked up the house and headed to bed. I had changed the locks earlier, so I felt I could sleep safely without her barging in. I figure she would be royally peeved. Knowing her, she was going to want to kill me. I drifted off to sleep with a smile on my face. I was right. I was awakened by pounding on my front door at about 2 a.m. It woke me up in a bad mood. I like to get my 8. I am just a jerk if I don't get my 8. I put in my earbuds and dialed up some soothing, smooth jazz. I couldn't hear the doorbell or the pounding on the door. Cool. I tried to go back to sleep. The next thing I know, a bunch of peeved-off cops are rocking my rear out of bed. Yes, they arrested me. I have a really great lawyer. He has been my lawyer for years and years. We met back in college. He was a wild man. We partied a lot back then. We raised our families together. I knew he would take care of things for me. They finally took me out of Gen Pop and up to the interrogation room. My lawyer, Dirk, was waiting inside for me. Good grief, Bob. You just gotta learn to let go. Nonsense, Dirk. She is cheating on me. I'm her husband, for goodness sakes. She is my wife, I said. Was, Bob. Was your wife. Not your wife now, and not your wife for more than 5 years. I was about to respond, but Dirk just raised his hand. Bob, she was your wife. You got a divorce. Damn, you gotta let it go, man. Your obsession is just sick. Look, they are going to throw the book at you on this one. Geez, man, it was her freaking wedding night, for God's sakes, he said, getting up from his chair. You are on your own. I'm done. I'm out. Don't call me. As Dirk walked out the door, he looked back at me and said, You need help. Seriously, Bob. You really need to get some professional help. All of that happened almost 5 years ago. After 5 years in lockup, occasionally in solitary, with the attending bumps and bruises, I can say with authority that I don't like being locked up. It stinks. It's been tough. As I lie in my bunk, I am having trouble sleeping. Tomorrow is my first shot at parole, so that has me a bit keyed up. The food stinks. I'm not even kidding about that. You do meet some folks, but it ain't high school. I do get somewhat better medical attention than I did outside. Outside, I didn't have a shrink, for example. My prison shrink runs several support groups. He has one group he calls his FUM, Fooled Up Men group. It's not the group's official name, but when I thought about the group, they all were pretty fooled up men. Hence the name, I guess. There is Bone. He was a big rear dude. He is a father fooler. You really didn't want to mess with him, trust me. And there is Slug. He is a pain-focused bottom. He is actually in prison because he wants to be. That, of course, qualifies him as a fooled-up man, I'd say. I get along best with Max. He doesn't do divorce, he says. It's against God's law or something. He's an until death kind of guy. He has had 4 wives. So I have a support group. I'm working on myself. I am goal-setting. It is important to keep your eye on the ball. The docs are giving me good marks. I've been staying out of trouble, and tomorrow I will say anything they want me to. Now and then, if you play the long game, things work out. And I have my parole hearing in the morning. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. You did well today, Mr. Bennett. Just keep that ice bag on your knee for 30 minutes or more if you need it. You already took an ibuprofen and an acetaminophen, so no more for 3 hours. Yeah, I remember. When will you be back? Well, today is Monday. You do your exercises tomorrow and I'll be back on Wednesday. Remember, on Wednesday we start an earlier schedule. There'll be no more of these late morning workouts. I'll be here at 9 and then you'll have the rest of the day to yourself. Sounds good. Travel safe, Megs. I'll be here. That last bit made her chuckle. I wasn't going anywhere just yet. She was pleasant enough when she's finished, but a freaking sadist when she's working me over. 10 days ago, I had knee replacement surgery on my right knee. I heard stories about post-op physical therapy, and there was nothing about it that sounded good other than, it won't last forever. I figured I could push my way through just about anything if I knew there was an end in sight, but I guess everyone I know must have a higher threshold for pain than me. This was torture. The whole idea behind physical therapy after knee replacement is to get at least a 90-degree bend to the knee. Sounds easy, right? The surgeon cuts the tissue, and then the tissues mend by reattaching the fibers and growing together. The problem is, the cut segments tend to attach to anything nearby, and the physical therapy is designed to break all those undesirable attachments until the knee once again operates correctly and bends as intended. Think about that while you pour me a beer. The therapist got in her car and drove off. Her name is Maggie, if anyone cares. She's actually a good kid, but she has no pity. She's heard the screams before and knows that pain is the path to recovery. When I'm feeling generous, I do call her the kid. I'm guessing she's in her mid-20s and I'm 57, so she's a kid to me. Not that it matters, but my name is Henry Bennett, and I build custom kitchen cabinets in a small four-man shop that I own. And, yeah, one of those men is a woman and she's a damn good carpenter and cabinet maker. But I'm old school and saying four-person shop just doesn't sound right. I've been thinking about expanding the business to include furniture, and Windsor chairs mostly, so retirement isn't something I'm considering. It seems like I'm up and down all day, squatting and standing, and then kneeling on that hard floor, so one way or another the cartilage wore out in my knee, and I wound up with some factory replacement parts. So I'm sitting here by my front window with my leg up, ice on the knee, and I'm watching Megs drive off when I notice Jenny Carpenter pull into her garage across the street. The Carpenters are in their late 20s. Chris is also a carpenter by trade, which makes his name all the more ironic, and he was working hard to build his own small company of carpentry contractors. They did good work and were sought after by homeowners who needed home repairs and remodels, as well as the mid-size companies that often needed to hire in some additional talent. I know he had dreams of expanding his company so they could become the prime contractor for new home construction, and we had long talks about how to grow a young company. That was something I knew a little about. Meanwhile, Jenny is an attractive blonde who works for one of the big investment houses in the city. I liked her. I'm thinking to myself, they really are the perfect couple when I see a black BMW pull into her driveway. You don't see a lot of those in this neighborhood, and you don't see guys in expensive suits walk into a neighbor's front door like he owns the place. But I saw one that day. I watched Jenny's place while I ice my knee. After a half hour of icing my knee, I make my way into the kitchen for a sandwich. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't carry a plate and a drink while I use this damn walker to get back to my living room. So I pack the sandwich in a paper bag and pour my drink into a to-go cup, put both in the basket on the front of the walker, and make my way back to my chair. I dropped in my seat, and the BMW was still there. I've still got some ice, so I put the ice bag back on my knee while I sit there and watch my neighbor's house across the street. Time passes. It's a long hour before the suit finally leaves. 10 minutes later, the garage door opens and Jenny leaves too. Okay, I tell myself there are 1,000 perfectly good excuses for what I just saw. Jenny isn't the type. I try to put it out of my mind, but I'm just so damn bored sitting here. Damn it, I need a book or a puzzle or anything to keep my mind occupied. The shop called twice with some fairly simple questions. I suspect they were just keeping in touch so I didn't feel left out. With nothing else to do, I decided to look through a few books on chair design, and I began to pore over ideas for a line of simple, stylish chairs that we could make in the shop. I was still sitting there in the late afternoon, alternating between having my leg up and doing my bending exercises, then going to get a bag of ice while I worked through books on chair design. As I read, I drew some design ideas. I was trying to develop something traditional, but comfortable. It was growing dark when I happened to look up and noticed Chris's truck pull into their garage. Jenny's car was already parked in its usual place. That's when my mind returned to that black BMW and the driver with the fancy suit who seemed to act like he lived there. I began to gather my drawings and notes when I saw Chris making his way across the street. He was headed for my house. I made my way slowly to the door and opened it just as he arrived. I stepped back to let him into the house, which was more difficult than you might think with that damn walker. "Chris, what brings you here?" "Well, Jenny thought that with you convalescing and not able to spend a lot of time on your feet, you might like some home-cooked food. So she packed up a dinner for you and sent me across the street to deliver it." I laughed. "I love that girl of yours." As we made our way slowly back to the kitchen, I asked, "What did your lovely wife fix for this tired old man?" "First of all, you aren't old," he answered. "But I am tired." I was still laughing, but Chris was the real first visitor I'd had all day if you don't count Nurse Payne, and I was enjoying the company. He set the food on the table and began to unpack it. There was a big bowl of corn chowder and some ham biscuits with a nice salad. "My God, there's enough here for the both of us." "Oh no, no way. If I eat even a bite of it, my wife will find out and I'll be in a heap of trouble. That's all for you." I admit that I was smiling now. "I guess there's enough here for dinner and for lunch tomorrow. Please tell your lovely wife thank you from me. Now, can I offer you a beer before you make that long and arduous hike back home?" Chris was smiling, and he knew my thanks were sincere. "No, she'll be waiting for me. I'd better get moving. I'll try to stop in tomorrow evening." "I'll be here. I've got nowhere to go for the next few weeks," I answered. As quick as that, I walked Chris back to the door, shook his hand, and he was gone. As I watched my friend walk back to his house, I thought about the value of good friends and thoughtful wives. I'm sure I'm wrong about her, I thought. She's not the type. I enjoyed my dinner that night. I also felt like I'd accomplished something with my drawings and notes, so I spent the evening watching television and reading. I also went through another bag of ice. Then, with another ibuprofen and an acetaminophen, I headed off to bed. Tuesday was largely uneventful. I fixed a simple breakfast of yogurt and granola with a glass of orange juice, took ibuprofen and acetaminophen, and then carried my coffee to my living room chair. I sipped my coffee while I gave the pills about 20 minutes to work, and then I started the unpleasant business of exercising my new store-bought knee. No pain, no gain. My exercises start with a series of simple motions like leg raises and ankle movements. Then I start the reclining knee bends, and when I'm ready, I use an elastic band to pull my ankle toward me and force the knee to bend. I do repetitions, and by the time I'm breathing like a long-distance runner, I'm ready to stop and ice the knee. It's not hard work, but it takes a lot of discipline to pull that band knowing it's going to hurt like hell. For the next half hour, I content myself with propping my leg up and applying ice. It's mid-morning before I'm ready to get on with my day, and I get back to working on those drawings that I started yesterday. Sitting by the window, I work and watch the world go by. Neighbors come and go from their houses. Dan Williams is out cutting his lawn. He's retired and has turned maintaining his lawn and property into an obsession. I guess that's what happens when you don't fish or play golf. The Daniels are out for their late morning stroll, and later Herb Jackson goes out for his run. The UPS truck delivers some boxes up and down the street, and eventually the mailman delivers the mail. Funny, but nobody seems to see me sitting by my window. I'm working away and glancing out the window when I see Herb walk up to the Perkins front door and let himself in. That's strange. Jim Perkins is away on business this week. I keep watching and try to work, and it isn't until an hour later that he leaves by the back door, walks down the driveway, and heads back toward his house. I tell myself that I'm letting my imagination get the better of me, but at the same time, I'm starting to think that I might be living in my very own Peyton place. Is this what goes on when I'm off at work every day, and exactly what is this I'm seeing? There must be an acceptable explanation, so I try to shake it off and get back to work. By the time night falls, I've done my exercises 3 times, taken my pills every 3 hours to stay ahead of the pain, as they say, and I finished off the last of Jenny's corn chowder and ham biscuits. Chris is home, and I didn't see Jenny until her usual time, so once again I try to shake off the thoughts I've been having. Wednesday morning comes, and soon Nurse Payne arrives. I had just enough time before her arrival to fix a light breakfast, to settle those 2 pills in my stomach, and fix some coffee as an early reward for what was to come. She was particularly hard on me that day, but she claims my knee is coming along nicely, and she's expecting full mobility. I reminded her that I was never that flexible to begin with, but she just ignored me. I offer her a cup of coffee before she leaves, but she tells me, "I've tried your coffee. You could use it for furniture stain." I try to tell her that there was a time when some cabinet makers did exactly that, but she's just shaking her head and telling me, "See you Friday. Do your exercises and keep applying ice." Nurse Payne was gone, and I sat back with a bag of ice on my knee to finish the last of my cold coffee. After that, it becomes a repeat of the day before. Dan is working in his garden that day, the Daniels take their morning walk, and I see Herb Jackson visiting Sally Perkins again. I'm telling you, it's a goddamn Sodom and Gomorrah. The lunch hour comes, and I'm preparing to fix a sandwich when I see Jenny Carpenter pulling into her garage. So I settle back into my chair, and 5 minutes later that black BMW pulls up, and the suit walks into the house through the front door. This time he's there for nearly 90 minutes, and I spend the time wondering how stupid I'm going to look if I say something to Chris and it's all a big mistake. I tell myself that I don't know her family. The suit could be her brother or a cousin. He could even be Chris's brother. I don't know. The rest of Wednesday passes uneventfully. Chris never made it over for that beer on Tuesday, but later Wednesday evening I heard a knock at the door. "Is that invitation for a beer still available?" "Sure. Do me a favor and grab 2. I'll meet you in the living room," I answered. We spent a pleasant hour before Chris had to head for home. I watched him closely during that time and never detected a note of unhappiness or distraction. If anything was going on, he didn't know. I thought about asking him what he might know about BMWs or if he had any relatives who had one, but I decided I could never pull it off. So I let it drop. Thursday was a repeat of Tuesday. I divided my time between exercising and icing my knee, then I'd work on my designs, take some pills, and repeat. Life was becoming boring and predictable. Meanwhile, Dan was developing the fine art of washing his car, the Daniels took their walk, and Herb visited Sally Perkins. That old fart was getting more action this week than I'd had in 2 years. I suppose I should explain that last remark. You see, my wife Peg died 2 years ago. She was my lover and my best friend. Her death was just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time when a distracted city truck driver ran through a red light. I was assured that she didn't suffer, but I sure as hell did. I keep her photograph on the table by my chair. Both our kids are off building their lives as they should be, but it does get lonely sometimes. They offered to stay with me during my recovery, but I told them I'd be okay. After all, I had Nurse Payne to take care of me. When I told my kids I was prepared to be stuck at home for a few weeks and that I'd laid in a few cases of beer to see me through, my daughter looked at my son, and the next thing I knew, the fridge and freezer were full. I was only kidding. Friday came, and Mags was her usual punctual self. I was prepared with breakfast, pills, and coffee, so she didn't waste any time getting ready. She starts in on me. "You're progressing quickly, Henry. You must be doing your exercises religiously." If I'm progressing so damn quick? Damn, that hurt. How come you keep working me over like a redneck prison guard? "You have experience with prison guards, do you?" she asked. I swear I don't know whether to laugh or swear at this woman sometimes. The latest torture session was over, and she returned from the kitchen with the ice bag. "I know the weekend is coming, but I want you to continue your exercises both Saturday and Sunday." I take a deep breath and nod my head. "Then I'll see you again Monday, okay?" she answered. "Okay," I replied. "You don't sound enthusiastic, Henry. Are you becoming immune to my charms?" Okay. That gets a little laugh out of me as I swallow a response that I would regret later. "You have a good weekend, and I'll buy some new locks for the door before Monday." She chuckles. "Next week we'll start working with a cane and try to get you off that walker." "I like the sound of that. It's a deal." That's what passes for banter with Nurse Payne, and with that, she was gone. Friday continued like every other day. Dan was trimming the bushes along the front of the house, the Daniels took their walk, and Herb visited Sally Perkins. I was thinking about how life had become so horribly predictable when the black BMW pulled into the Carpenter driveway. I must have missed Jenny pulling into her garage. I wondered if they had a regular Monday, Wednesday, and Friday schedule and how long had this been going on. I fixed myself a sandwich and treated myself to a beer, then watched quietly until the suit left with Sally following him 10 minutes later. A horrible sadness came over me then. I liked these two, Sally and Chris. They were thoughtful and kind. They always seemed loving and attentive toward each other. What I was seeing now seemed so horribly out of character for her. I searched my imagination for a credible explanation and admitted that it was all conjecture on my part. But it bothered me terribly. That weekend I did two things. I watched to see if the suit visited while Chris was home, and I started making plans. He never visited, and my plans developed quickly. I worried greatly over what I was considering. If you asked me whether I was certain that I was doing the right thing, I'd have told you, I don't know. This much I did know. If I approached Jenny with anything resembling an accusation, she would deny it, and I would be labeled an insulting old man and lose two friends. If I approached Chris, he would blow his top at me, and again I would be labeled an insulting old man and lose two friends. If I ignored it, I would have difficulty looking Chris in the eye and pretending to be his friend as I kept the painful truth from him. The only solution was to help him see for himself and hope I was wrong. I spent the weekend developing a list of my needs if I expand the shop as planned. By then I was thinking about some tables to go with those chairs. I needed open space to move large pieces of wood into position at the machines, and I needed 240-volt power in multiple places. I also needed space for workbenches where I could work by hand fitting mortise and tenon joints, and then I needed clean space for finishes. Basically, I needed to at least double my current space. I drew up some ideas playing with multiple concepts until I realized that I also needed additional space to store my wood because tables need large pieces of hardwood, whereas cabinets use a lot of high-grade plywood with quality veneers for the boxes. It was turning into a big job. I went to bed Sunday night with a heavy heart knowing that the coming week would most likely be painful for someone, but I also knew that the someone might be me. Monday morning came, and with it came Nurse Payne's arrival. I knew the drill, and by then even I knew we were making progress. If torture meant I could return to work, bring on the torture. She left me once again sipping my coffee and balancing the ice bag on my knee. I tried to work, but my mind wouldn't focus. Dan was cutting his lawn again, and the Daniels took their walk. Jim Perkins was back from his travels, but he still had an office in town where he worked, so Herb visited Sally Perkins again. I could not help but wonder why someone would stay married if they felt the need to cheat on their spouse. Was it money, security, or just a bad habit? Was it a game for them? Some despicable way to bring a little excitement to their boring lives? I suppose they probably thought they'd never get caught. I liked both Herb's wife and Sally's husband. They deserved better. Noontime came, and I watched Jenny pull into her garage and lowered the door. 5 minutes later, the black BMW pulled into the drive, and I watched the suit once again walk into the carpenter's house like he lived there. My mind was made up, and I knew what I had to do. An hour later, the suit left, and then Jenny left a short time later. It broke my heart. Monday afternoon and Tuesday passed uneventfully with me trying to keep busy, fielding the occasional call from the shop, and watching the neighbors. Nothing seemed to change. Wednesday morning, I watched Chris head off to work. Mags arrived and gave me a working over, and then I sat with my ice and my coffee watching her leave. It was time. I picked up my cell and called Chris. "Chris Carpenter here." "Chris, it's Henry Bennett. How are you doing?" I asked. "Good, Henry. To what do I owe the pleasure?" That line cut through me like a knife. If things went as I expected, there would be no pleasure in this for anyone. I was wondering if I could tempt you with a sandwich and beer for lunch, I answered. I could hear him chuckling. Wow, it's hard to turn down an offer like that. And while you're here, I'm thinking of expanding my shop, and I'd like to see what kind of ideas you might have. Chris thought for a moment. Sure, I could stop by tonight and we can work over what you have for ideas. Now came the big whopper. Actually, my kids are talking about visiting tonight and I have everything worked out here. I was hoping you might come around, say 11:30 or noon today. I hated lying to him like this. Sure, why not? I could use a break in the routine. Okay, I'll come round for lunch and we can talk about the new shop. Great, see you then, I answered. I felt terrible. There were a dozen ways this whole thing could go wrong, starting with Chris calling his wife Jenny, and the suit don't get together today, she sees Chris's car in my driveway, and so on. I felt fairly sure I could claim ignorance either way. But doesn't that make me a coward? Sadly for everyone, Jenny and the suit were as predictable as all my other neighbors. Chris arrived at about 11:45 and joined me in the front room. I had all my notes and drawings arranged, and after Chris got us each a beer from the fridge, we settled down with sandwiches, chips, and a cold glass. It would be downhill from there. We sat at the table by my front window and started going over my list of needs as I saw them. I showed him a drawing of my current shop and began to show him sketches of the sort of thing that I had in mind. At 12:05, Jenny pulled into her garage. Chris watched for a moment with a slightly confused but happy smile on his face, and then we resumed our discussion. We were at a fairly productive point in the plans when the black BMW pulled into Chris's driveway at 12:10. Chris was speaking and stopped suddenly as the suit got out of the car and again walked through his front door as he lived there. I watched my friend without speaking and waited. He tried to return to the drawings, but to no avail. I suppose 10 minutes passed with Chris trying to speak, trying to study the plans, but returning to watch his house, until my friend just said, "Excuse me." Without another word, he rose, walked out the front door, and crossed the street to his own house. It was odd, but I could swear that this time I watched a man walk through his own front door like he no longer lived there, and I wondered if he would be my neighbor for much longer. My window was open, and moments later I could hear the commotion. There was screaming and shouting, and it sounded like furniture was being thrown. I heard glass breaking and the loud thuds of what I assumed were chairs hitting the wall. Shortly after that, the suit came running out the front door half-dressed, jumped in his car, and raced away. It was silent after that. Time passed, and just when I began to worry that Chris might have harmed his wife, he left his home as he had entered it and walked back across the street and into my house. He just dropped onto my sofa with that 1,000-mile stare I'd heard about and said nothing. I figured my job was to wait until he was ready to speak, and in time he said, "The cheating woman was loving him in our bed. Can you believe it? Jenny, of all people?" I stood and handed him the remains of his beer, saying, "Here, drink this and I'll get you a refill." He threw it down in one gulp. Thinking he needed to let it out, I said, "You saw them?" He just nodded. "You're sure it was consensual?" I asked. He spoke like he was in a daze. "I heard her. She was a willing participant." For all my watching and planning, I didn't know what to do next. So I got Chris that second beer and sat back down to be the concerned listener that I assumed he needed. He finally started up. "A husband should never be expected to see what I saw. My wife was naked with that jerk. She had her legs wrapped around him and was making all the sounds, only louder. She was enjoying it." Then Chris looked at me and said, "I saw him when he climbed off her. He's nothing special." This was going to be a slow discussion, and I needed to let my friend talk as much as he wanted. When he'd been silent long enough, I said, "I heard a lot of noise like glass breaking and furniture being thrown. You didn't do anything you'll regret, did you?" "No." Then after a pause, he said, "Not unless you count marrying that cheating woman in the first place?" It was about this time that I saw Jenny's car back slowly down the drive. It seemed to hesitate for a time and then drove away. I think I just saw Jenny drive off. Yeah, I told her to get her cheating back out of the house. Chris's hands were shaking, and his color looked like death. I knew this next bit was going to go over badly, but it needed to be said. You need time to come to terms with what just happened. It may not be the end of the world. I'm not saying it will be easy, but I do know that girl loves you. Maybe you can patch things up once you've had a little time to think about it. The look he gave me was not encouraging. That's when I made my big mistake. Thinking that misery loves company, I blurted out, "You're not alone. Herb Jackson is over at Sally Perkins' house every day while her husband is at work." Chris just shook his head in disgust and muttered something under his breath. Then he turned to me. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you asked me to come over today. What is it? Does that jerk show up every day like clockwork?" I tried to stay out of it, but Chris would not be denied. "Well," he pressed. With a very reluctant voice, I said, "Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays as best I can tell." "For how long?" Chris's rage was building. "Last week and now this week. I don't know how long it's been going on." For a time, I stopped worrying about Jenny and started worrying about myself. Chris was showing signs of a beaten man, and there was anger in his eyes. I remember thinking to myself, that's what happens when a wife cheats on her husband. She robs him of his pride, and then the anger takes over. For a time, Chris's rage seemed to dissipate as my friend dropped his face into his hands and wept. I had all kinds of regret at this point, and again I wondered if I should have just turned a blind eye and let things happen as they were destined to happen, but those idiots were parking his car right in front of the house where all the neighbors could see it. What did they expect would happen? At least Herb tries to be a little discreet, not that I respect him anymore for it. It was a long and largely quiet hour after that as Chris nursed his second and eventually his third beer. I tried to find ways to assure him that he was justified in whatever he did, while reminding him that she did love him even if it didn't seem it now. I don't know how much of it got through. His cell phone rang. Chris told his office that he was out for the day, and eventually he headed home after I invited him to stay as long as he wanted. He just shook his head, saying, "I need to face this sooner or later, and it might as well be sooner." He left his car in my driveway and walked back to his house a broken man. An hour later, he was back, and I poured him another beer. He said, "I cleaned up most of the mess. There's probably still part of that broken mirror in the carpet." When I asked how the mirror wound up broken, he smiled. The jerk ducked. The chair missed him and hit the mirror. In a silly attempt at support, I said, "I was surprised he was able to leave under his own power." "Yeah, I regret that," Chris replied. "Just as well. You don't want to go behind bars for that jerk." He just shrugged and shook his head as if he wasn't sure. We sat and drank well into the evening. I heated some leftover pot roast in a failed attempt at sobriety while Jenny never came home that night. Then, long after dark, Chris made the lonely journey back to his own place. Thursday morning, Chris's car was still in my driveway, so I called his house after a suitable time in the hope that he might be up and sober. He didn't answer the first time, but he did a half hour later. He'd been in the shower when I first called. I asked him, "Are you interested in getting some breakfast? I can cook, or you can drive us out someplace." "Why don't I drive?" "Are you okay to drive?" He just gave me a sad laugh and said, "Yeah, I can drive. I'll be over in 10. Good to his word, he was at my door 10 minutes later. We hit a diner in town where I figured it was again my job just to listen if he wanted to talk. There were other people around us, so we kept it quiet. Jenny had called late the night before in an effort to apologize. She talked through her tears, and to Chris's credit, he kept his temper in check. He wasn't ready to see her, so she said that she would be at her sister's house when he was ready. I didn't hear much about their struggles after that. Chris would come by once or twice every week, and we would drink a few beers while he would ask vague and largely introspective questions about marriage. I got the distinct impression that things were not going well. That impression was confirmed when the for sale sign went up in the front yard. He told me they were divorcing, and he was thankful that they had no kids as yet. The most telling thing he ever said about the whole matter was that Jenny had admitted in therapy that she was very good at compartmentalizing her life and that her lover had nothing to do with their marriage. Chris just shook his head and muttered, "Psychopath," and that was the end of our discussion. He did learn that the affair had gone on for longer than he could forgive. It was sad to see their marriage end, and I asked myself many times if I should have simply turned a blind eye in the hope that Jenny would wise up and Chris would never learn of it. Inevitably, I would then ask myself how I would feel if I were in Chris's position, and every time I decided that I would hate the friend who kept that secret from me. Jenny and Chris divorced and went their separate ways. It was years before Chris would trust another woman, but when he did, he seemed to choose well. He met a widow his age with young kids, and she knew the value of fidelity. Chris had always wanted kids and took to fatherhood like a duck to water. We remained friends, and he did build the addition on the side of my shop. As for me, I never remarried. I told you that my wife died 2 years before my knee surgery. She was everything I ever wanted in a partner, and I miss her to this day. I figured one was my limit and never tempted fate again. However, I have a few girlfriends who place no claims on me, cannot get pregnant no matter how hard we try, and still like to sleep with a man from time to time. Yes, menopause is our friend. I have a good job, great kids, and company when I want it. Life is good. However, life is not so good for one Herbert Jackson. It was about 2 weeks after Chris discovered his wife with that suit. I was sitting by my front window. By then, I was getting around pretty well with a cane and dividing my time between the office and my home. I wasn't quite ready for the shop floor just yet, but I was slowly getting there. I was looking through some drawings for some kitchen remodeling jobs and working up some quotes when I heard the familiar sound of glass breaking and furniture hitting the wall. I looked over at the Perkins house in time to see a naked Herb Jackson come running out the front door and down the street with his pants in his hand, followed close behind by Jim Perkins swinging a baseball bat. I said to myself, "Caught another one." Jim looked highly motivated, and I placed Herb's chances of getting home at no better than 50-50. I never did find out who tipped off Jim Perkins, but I suspect it might have been a very angry carpenter who lived nearby. A week after that, I was finally back on the shop floor, working late, and thanking Providence that I was no longer sitting in my front window watching the lives of my neighbors in my very own Peyton Place. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.